Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Saturday morning. We have a wonderful slate of 7 games around the association. 8 games, actually, sorry. 9 if you count the early game. We're not going to talk about that one here. Just a quick heads up. I am going to be changing the way that I do the NBA recordings now, just because with baseball right around the corner, I want to be able to have enough time in the day to record both baseball and basketball videos and keep things short enough where you guys can watch both of those if you're interested in both NBA and MLB DFS. Also, if you are interested in signing up for MLB projections, content breakdowns, and all that good stuff, you can do so now. I am accepting payments on that stuff already. If you're already signed up for my NBA content package, then you already know the price and all that good stuff. You know, you get a little bit of a discount for being an NBA customer. If you're not signed up to any of that and you just happen to stumble across this video, you can send me a direct message on Twitter. My Twitter handle at BrentHyden1 is in the description down below. Find out how you can get access to my MLB content projections. If you sign up between now and opening day, you will get rest of the season NBA content projections, all that good stuff for free. But so how I'm going to do things now, I'm just going to cover like 4 or 5 guys at each position that I really like. Largely going to focus on top plays, kind of like a GPP-ish play and a value play. Things like that. The rest of the breakdown, though, for you guys that have been reading it, I do appreciate it. That's not going to change. That's all going to be the same as it was before. So if you want the in-depth stuff, you can check that out. Again, going to try to keep these things about 10-15 minutes. That way there's enough time for you, for all you guys to be able to get in the MLB and NBA content. But I'm also going to cover like the top games that I want to target just for reference and things like that. So let's take a look at the games that we do have. For today, we have the games that I'm primarily looking at here. Golden State at Philadelphia, a 236 over under. Philly only 4 point, or Golden State only 4 point favorites. Klay Thompson's questionable for this game, so I do expect him to actually sit out. So that's something to keep an eye on. I do have a little bit of interest in this Memphis Dallas game, and I'll get to a couple guys I like in that game. I think that total is actually a little low here, but OKC San Antonio, we're still. Paul George has listed out. I don't know why there's not a total on that game yet. That's a game that I'm interested in, of course. New Orleans at Denver is another game that I'm pretty interested in, obviously. 234 over under. Lakers at Phoenix, a 234 over under. Interested in that one as well. And then this Milwaukee Utah game. I'm going to get to one guy that I actually really like in this game, regardless of the status of Giannis. I actually do think that Giannis sits this game out with it being a back-to-back. But let's go ahead and get into the plays that I'm primarily looking at here. There's a few guys. Starting at the point guard position, Russell Westbrook, obviously, the top guy that I'm looking at here, coming in at 11.5 over on DraftKings. He is, what's his price over on FanDuel? He's 11.7 on FanDuel. I don't know that I really need to do a whole lot to make my case for Russell Westbrook with Paul George being ruled out for this game. 36.7% usage rate, 1.62 fantasy points per minute without George on the floor. Spurs 25th in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards this season. They are really struggling to defend the rim, allowing opponents to shoot 64.7% at the rim. They also really struggle defending in the paint. That's an area we've been able to attack them. They're allowing opponents to shoot 42.6% in the paint, 43.2% in the mid-range. Russ has 12 triple-doubles over his last 15 games. Obviously, Russell Westbrook is in a really good spot here tonight. Someone that I have a lot of interest in, averaging 67 fantasy points and 41 minutes against the Spurs this season. I'd say without Paul George, he's a pretty good bet for like a 60 fantasy point game in this spot. Stephen Curry, 9,100 over on DraftKings, 9,400 over on FanDuel. He's the other guy that I have a lot of interest in. As I mentioned, I do actually expect Klay Thompson to sit this game out. And because of that, I absolutely love Stephen Curry. Sixers defense, 109.9 defensive rating over the last 10 games. Obviously, without Joel Embiid, things are going to be a little bit different for the Sixers. Again, Golden State only 4-point favorites in this game. It's kind of crazy. Obviously, that does make me think that Klay Thompson sits this game out. Sixers 16th in defensive efficiency, 2-point guards over the last 10 games. Since DeMarcus Cousins made his debut for the Sixers, Curry owns a 43.7% usage rate, averaging 1.55 fantasy points per minute with Klay Thompson off the floor. Those are some pretty impressive numbers. If you stretch it out over the entire season, it's not that much different for Curry for the entire season. I'm pulling that up now, but 45.2% usage rate, 1.76 fantasy points per minute. So yeah, obviously those numbers very inflated. It's still a 462-minute sample size for the entire season, so that's a pretty large sample. So that's something to definitely keep in mind here. The next guy that I have interest in, I mentioned having interest in Memphis at Dallas. Luka Doncic, obviously a really, really good option here coming in. What's his price tag? He is $9,600 on DraftKings, $9,700 on FanDuel. I think people are going to shy away from Memphis and Dallas, and I think that's a mistake. People have been shying away from targeting Memphis because of this perception that they're a very, very good defense, slow-paced, all that stuff. While that is generally true, their pace has increased without Jaren Jackson, without Marc Gasol on the floor. Their defense has started to struggle without Jaren Jackson and Marc Gasol on the floor. They have like well over a 100 defensive rating with those guys off the floor. 106.9 defensive rating on the season. Given that they struggle to defend in transition, that's a big boost for Luka Doncic. Over the last 10 games, 33% usage rate, averaging 24.4 points, go along with 36% shooting from beyond the arc, 9.4 rebounds, 7.4 assists. Opponents are shooting over 50% on 2-point attempts against the Grizzlies with Jaren Jackson and with Marc Gasol off the floor. That's a pretty good thing for Luka Doncic. 34% of his shots come in the paint or mid-range, 27% of his shots come at the rim. So he's definitely someone that I have a lot of interest in here. Tyler Johnson, a good value play in the spot, someone that I also really, really like. Obviously, in a very, very good game to target. Lakers, Sixers, very, very high total. Tyler Johnson coming in at $5K on DraftKings, $5,700 over on FanDuel. Minutes are going to be there for him. Only 29 against the Pelicans. Did kind of play like garbage. But again, minutes are going to be there for him. It's a pretty good spot for him. Lakers really bad against opposing point guards. They're one of the worst defenses in the NBA against opposing point guards over the last 10 games. 24th in defensive efficiency. That was pulled last night, and I'm sure that number has definitely changed. So he's someone that I definitely think we need to be looking at as a value option here tonight. Again, just $5K on DraftKings, $5,700 on FanDuel. Looking at the shooting guard position, I really like DeMar DeRozan. Again, I want a decent amount of exposure to this Oklahoma City-San Antonio game. DeMar DeRozan, starting at the small forward position pretty much, 25th in defensive efficiency is what the Thunder rank two small forwards on the season. He is second on the team in rebounding chances at 10.8 per game. That's pretty important to keep in mind with the Thunder being a really poor rebounding team recently. They're giving up 46 rebounds per game. Almost 50 points in the paint. Opponents are shooting 44% against them in the paint over the last 10 games, 42% this season. He takes 36% of his shots in the paint, 71% of his shots overall coming in the paint or the mid-range. DeMar DeRozan, $7,800 on DraftKings. That price tag is just a little bit too cheap for DeRozan here tonight. 40-plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4, averaging about 40 fantasy points per game against the Thunder. He's going to play a lot of minutes. Obviously, one of those games was overtime, so that's something to keep in mind. But I still really, really like him here tonight. Looking at that Dallas-Memphis game once again, Avery Bradley, who has been outstanding over the last 10 games for the Grizzlies. He's someone that I have a lot of interest in. 4,300 over on DraftKings, 5,400 over on FanDuel. Safe cash game option, has some tournament upside as we saw against the Chicago Bulls. We've seen the upside also against San Antonio. This is a very similar matchup to the Chicago Bulls game against a Dallas team that really struggles to defend in the paint. This is a spot where with Avery Bradley taking 54% of his shots in the mid-range. I did misspeak. Dallas struggles to defend in the mid-range. Avery Bradley taking 54% of his shots in the mid-range. Dallas, pulling it up right now, is allowing opponents to shoot 44.4% in the mid-range over the last 10 games. I really, really like him here tonight. Just going to throw out, going to cheat a little bit here because the shooting guard position is pretty garbage. Malcolm Brogdon, blah, 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 cash games. He's your guy. 30-plus fantasy points in like 6 straight games now. 7 straight games. And yeah, he's basically going to get you 30-plus fantasy points just about every single night. With the potential of Giannis missing this game, that's obviously a little bit of a boost to him here tonight. So I have interest in him. And going to lump Chris Middleton in here at the shooting guard position as well, because that's what he's listed on like FanDuel. He's the small forward, obviously. Over the last 10 games, Utah 26th in defensive efficiency, 2 small forwards. We've been able to target Utah with 3-point shooters all season long because they've really struggled to defend the 3-point line. And given that he takes 41% of his shots from 3, given the usage boost that he's going to see if Giannis misses this game, I really like Middleton. I like Middleton regardless. Opposing small forwards shooting 41.2% against Utah this season. But again, if Giannis misses, huge boost in usage and production for Giannis would become, or for Middleton, who becomes one of my top small forward shooting guard options on the slate. You can play him at small forward over on DraftKings if you want to. Looking at the small forward position, LeBron James, touching the ball almost 100 times per game, playing a pile of minutes, 11-4 over on DraftKings, 12-3 over on FanDuel. Gonna play like 38, 39, 40 minutes most nights, gonna shoot like 20 times. Again, touching the ball 100 times per game, averaging almost a triple-double since returning from his groin injury, 22.4 potential assists per game since returning. It's a matchup against Phoenix. I don't really think I need to say a whole lot else. It might be possible to get LeBron and Westbrook in your lineups, depending on how you go. That might not be a terrible idea. But he's an interesting option if you're wanting to pivot off of Westbrook. Sticking with the Lakers, I guess I have to talk about Brandon Ingram, who continues to be just insanely good. I don't know where this Brandon Ingram stuff has come from, but he's 6,600 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. He's been over 40 fantasy points in 2 of the last 4, and since the All-Star break has just been playing outstanding with over 40 fantasy points in 3 of those games, over 20 real points in each, playing a ton of minutes. It's a matchup against Phoenix. I don't know that I need to go too in-depth here, but I will say with Phoenix allowing opponents to shoot 64% or 65% at the rim this season, we should definitely be looking at Ingram, who continues to fill it up. He takes a very large portion of his shots at the rim, which is why that's very important. New Orleans, Denver. This is my first exposure that I've talked about to this game. Will Barton, 5,700 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. Kind of tough to trust given how up and down he's been for the majority of the season, but he's been playing really well recently. Over 30 minutes in the last 2 games, 16 field goal attempts in each of those games, over 20 real points in each of those games. The usage is going to be there for him. It generally just comes down to whether or not he's going to get the minutes and if he's going to hit his shots. Given that the Pelicans rank 28th in defensive efficiency to opposing small forwards, and they allow opponents to shoot 66.4% at the rim over the last 10 games, I think Barton's going to have a pretty good game here because he takes 34% of his shots at the rim. I feel like he's just a little bit too cheap for small forward exposure in this game. And the last guy I'm going to talk about, going back to Golden State at Philly, still sticking with the trend that I do think Klay Thompson sits. Kevin Durant, 9,200 on DraftKings, 9,500 over on FanDuel. I have interest in him regardless, just because he comes with a pretty safe 40 fantasy point floor, and I'll take that at his price tag. A couple of these games recently, he hasn't hit 40 fantasy points. It's just 2. But like, if you just go back through and look at his games for the majority of the season, you're locking in a guy with basically a 40 fantasy point floor most nights, and that's pretty appealing. If Klay Thompson misses, which again, I do expect him to, 36% usage rate, 1.41 fantasy points per minute without Thompson on the floor since Boogie made his debut. And if you stretch that out the entire season, 564 minutes, 38% usage rate, 1.57 fantasy points per minute. And just for thoroughness sake, looking at the last 2 seasons, if I can get it to pull up in a timely manner, for Kevin Durant without Klay Thompson on the floor, 37.6% usage rate, 1.57 fantasy points per minute. Stephen Curry, 42% usage rate, 1.70 fantasy points per minute. Looking at the power forward position, sticking with the Golden State at Philly game, Tobias Harris, 7,700 over on DraftKings. Really good price tag there for how well he's been playing. 8K over on FanDuel. He's a guy I currently have projected for about 40 fantasy points across both sites. Again, he's been playing really, really well. Over 40 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games without Joel Embiid. That's appealing. The matchup, not great, but he's been really efficient from 3 this season, connecting on 43.2% of his shots. And without, Golden State, over the last 10 games, 37% shooting allowed to power forwards from 3-point range. And I will go ahead and pull this up, even though it's a very small sample. But with Joel Embiid and Boban off the floor this season, Tobias Harris, 24% usage rate, 1.27 fantasy points per minute. So that's pretty appealing here tonight. Going back to OKC San Antonio, again, mentioned this game, very, very appealing. I mentioned OKC's struggles defending in the paint and keeping opponents off the glass. LaMarcus Aldridge, 7,700 over on DraftKings. Really attractive price tag over there. 8,300 over on FanDuel. I really like LaMarcus Aldridge in this spot here tonight, taking a very large portion of his shots in the paint. And that's attractive, again, because Oklahoma City allowing opponents to just light them up in the paint this season. 35% of his shots come in the paint. A lot of the offense is going to flow through Aldridge and DeRozan, and that's really appealing in what should be a very high-scoring game. Sticking with that game, on the other side of the ball, Jeremy Grant, 5,100 on DraftKings, 6K over on FanDuel. I currently have him projected for like 38 minutes, and, well, if I'm getting a guy playing against a Spurs defense that is, well, terrible against opposing power forwards, they rank, 24th in defensive efficiency to power forwards, allowing them to shoot 37% from 3, pull down 10.4 rebounds per game. Kind of tough to expect Jeremy Grant to not have a good game, given that kind of minutes and the production that he's been able to put up this season. 5,100 on DraftKings, 6K over on FanDuel. Looking at a shot profile, 54% of his shots come at the rim. San Antonio allowing opponents to shoot 65% at the rim. Another 29% coming from 3, where San Antonio has allowed over 36% shooting this season. I do really like Derek Favors, the last guy that I'm going to talk about here. 4,800 on DraftKings. He is also cheap over on FanDuel. Pulling it up right now. What is he over on FanDuel? 6,900. Not as appealing there. But I still think he's perfectly viable in cash games, regardless of what site you're playing on. Milwaukee is a team that we have attacked with power forwards a lot this season. We've seen some of these stretch power forwards actually have a lot of success against them. A little bit worrisome, Milwaukee's rim protection numbers, because Favors does take a very large portion of his shots at the rim. But I think there's some rebounding upside here for him tonight, because opponents over the last 10 games have been just pummeling Milwaukee on the glass. They are giving up over 46 rebounds per game over the last 10 games. So I really like Derek Favors here tonight. Moving to the last position of the night, I promised some interest in New Orleans and Denver, and, well, we're going to get it here with Nikola Jokic. going to just go bonkers against Julius Randle, Jahlil Okafor, Cheikh Diallo, whatever Alvin Gentry throws out for this ragtag bunch of Pelicans without Anthony Davis. Continues to be a guy that's basically triple-double, double-double upside every single night. Has notched at least a double-double in 9 of the last 10 games, and 2 of those games he has a triple-double, or 4 of those games he has a triple-double. 30.1% usage rate. The very, very appealing thing for Nikola Jokic, we all know he's a great play, but 94.2 touches per game this season. Offense going through him a lot. Just a great option in pretty much all formats. He's just a guy, again, kind of like Russ and LeBron. You just feel pretty confident in the production you're going to get out of him every single night. 10-2 on DraftKings, 11-1 over on FanDuel. Going back to Golden State and Philly, DeMarcus Cousins, I do have a lot of interest in him just because, well, he's going to get Mike Scott and he's going to get Jonah Bolden defense. And, well, 8,200 for DeMarcus Cousins, 8,500 on FanDuel. In that kind of matchup, I really, really, really like him here. He's been over 30 minutes in the last 2 games, so we know the minutes limit is off of him. So that's really appealing. Without Klay Thompson pulling up his numbers right now, I don't think it matters that much. But 1.24 fantasy points per minute. It's a 51-minute sample size. He's averaging 1.4 fantasy points per minute basically on the season. Plenty of upside here. He's topped 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games, so I really like Cousins. DeAndre Ayton has been largely disappointing recently. Not a guy that has flashed a very large ceiling. Getting you a lot of games in these like mid to low 30s. I think he had like a ceiling game once over the last 10 games. That was against Golden State. But against the Lakers, who are one of the worst rebounding teams in the NBA, one of the teams that we love to pick on with opposing centers, I have a lot of interest in going back to the well with DeAndre Ayton, who is in a really good spot. He's been good against the Lakers this season. If you look at it, limited minutes, 27.6 minutes, but almost 40 fantasy points per game is what he's averaging. That's because a lot of blowouts. I think the Lakers have won by an average of like 14.5 points against the Suns this season. I'm pulling it up. They're 3-0 against the Suns, winning by an average of 18.7 points. But again, Lakers giving up 46.6 rebounds, 51 points in the paint, 13.8 second chance points. They're starting Kyle Kuzma at the 5, but LeBron's defending the 5 a lot. Actually, let me pull that up because I know that LeBron last night against like Brook Lopez was defending Lopez a lot, and that's interesting because again, I think DeAndre Ayton's someone that can kind of get after LeBron. Like, I like LeBron. He's a big dude. He can be good on defense whenever he tries, but yeah. So, LeBron James defended Brook Lopez 40, almost 50% of his possessions last season, or last night. That's pretty interesting. Looking back at the Lakers' last game before that, because this is actually somewhat important. I know this is dragging things out a little bit for the recording, but it's definitely something that we want to consider here. Player tracking. So matchups. Defensive player. LeBron James. So LeBron against the Pelicans defended Julius Randle 60% of his possessions. So that was when he was defending the power forward, basically. Anthony Davis was defended by Kyle Kuzma on 73, so they're kind of changing it up a little bit. Something to at least keep an eye on. Anyways, going back to Memphis at Dallas, this is another spot where it's somewhat dependent on whether or not Yvonne Robb plays. He's expected to suit up here, but I really like Joakim Noah still at 5K. I currently have him projected for this is with Yvonne Robb in 21 minutes. He still has a really, really high floor. Since the trade deadline, 1.40 fantasy points per minute. Dallas giving up 15.7 rebounds per game to opposing centers. And they're allowing opponents to shoot 66% at the rim. So Noah, who is obviously a rebounding machine, averaging 1.40 fantasy points per minute, takes almost all of his shots at the rim. Definitely a pretty good value option here tonight, again, at 5K. Depending on how you break down your lineup construction, he could be the guy that you want to get some exposure to. 79% of his shots come at the rim. But so that took 25 minutes. I'm going to try to shorten that up a little bit more. Again, as we head into MLB season, this is going to be the format of the breakdowns. But good luck in all your contests tonight. I will be back on Monday for, I think it's a smaller slate on Monday. I think it's like 6 games. But I will see you guys then.